This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Section 1. You will hear a conversation between a business coordinator named Mark and a receptionist at the Grand Horizon Hotel. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning, Grand Horizon Hotel. This is Sophie speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, good morning, Sophie. My name's Mark Jennings. I'm calling to inquire about hiring a conference room for a corporate training day. We're looking at sometime next month.
Of course, Mr. Jennings. Let me take down a few details. Could I start with your surname, please? You said Mark. And the last name?
Yes, it's Jennings. Jennings.
Thank you. And which company are you calling from?
We're from Meridian Solutions Limited, MERIDIAN.
Meridian Solutions Limited. Lovely. And do you have a preferred date in mind?
We were thinking the 14th of June. Would that work?
Let me check availability. Yes, the 14th of June is free for most of our spaces. Now, how many delegates are you expecting?
We're expecting around 40 people. Could be a few more, but 40 is the confirmed number for now.
40, right. So for a group of that size, I'd recommend our Horizon Suite. It can seat up to 60 comfortably. The room hire cost for a full day is £450, and also we do provide some things as standard. You'll get a microphone and a projector screen included at no extra cost. If you need a laptop or laser pointer, those are available to hire for an additional fee. And the video conferencing system requires a separate booking entirely.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Good. The microphone and screen will be fine. We'll bring our own laptop. Now, I did see a mention of the garden suite on your website. Would that be available on the same date?
I'm afraid not. The garden suite is already reserved by another client on the 14th of June. We do occasionally have it free during the week, but that particular date it's been taken.
Not to worry. The Horizon Suite sounds perfectly suitable. Now, in terms of catering, what are our options?
We offer 3 packages. First is a full buffet lunch service, which is quite popular. Second is tea and coffee breaks only, morning and afternoon, which is the most economical option. And third is a working lunch with sandwiches, so a hot drink at arrival, a light lunch delivered to the room, and an afternoon break.
I think the working lunch with sandwiches would suit us best, actually. Our team prefers to keep things moving rather than breaking for a full sit-down meal.
Excellent choice. That package is very popular with corporate training days. Now, to secure the booking, we do require a deposit. That's 25% of the total cost, payable within 5 business days. If you cancel more than 7 days in advance, you'll receive a full refund minus a small administration charge. However, if the cancellation is made within 7 days of the event, I'm afraid no refund is given at all. That's all the essential information. Is there anything else you want to know?
No, that's everything. Thank you so much, Sophie.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2. You will hear a wildlife officer named Mrs. Patel delivering a public information talk about a new conservation program at the Greenfield Nature Reserve. You have some time to read question 11 to 15. Now listen carefully to the talk.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming along today. My name is Mrs. Patel, and I'm the wildlife officer for this district. I'm here to tell you about an exciting new initiative, the Greenfield Nature Reserve Conservation Program, which we are officially launching this spring. The program has been made possible through joint funding. The local council has contributed significantly, and we are also very grateful to a national charitable organization who have provided match funding. Without their support, this scale of project simply wouldn't have been possible. Now, we are actively looking for volunteers, and I want to be very clear about the commitment involved. Before you can begin working in the reserve, all volunteers are required to attend a compulsory training session. This covers safety procedures, wildlife identification, and how to log your observations. The session runs for 3 hours and is held on the first Saturday of each month at the Visitor Center. Greenfield is one of the most biodiverse habitats in this region, and I'm pleased to say that the reserve currently provides habitat for over 80 species of native birds. That number has actually grown over the last 5 years thanks to previous conservation work, and we are hoping to see it continue to rise. I do want to mention one important restriction. The northern zone of the reserve, which is a critical nesting area, is closed to the public during the breeding season. Public access is restricted between January and April each year. Please do respect the signage and stay on marked paths during that period. Finally, I want to mention our volunteer recognition scheme. If you complete 50 or more hours of volunteer work within a calendar year, you will receive a formal accreditation certificate, which is a lovely thing to have on a CV, particularly if you're pursuing environmental or conservation studies.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, before I finish, I'd like to walk you through the layout of the reserve using the map you should have in front of you, or if you're seated at the back, there's one on the screen behind me. When you enter the main gate and walk straight ahead, the first thing you'll see directly in front of you, that's location A on your map, is the information board. Please do stop there first as it lists all current trail closures and safety notices. If you turn right from the entrance and follow the path for about 100 meters, you'll arrive at location B. We encourage visitors coming by car to use this car park, rather than the lay-by on the road. Continuing further along that eastern path, you'll reach location C. This is where you report any injured animals or unusual sightings. There's always rangers in the station on duty during opening hours. Now, heading back to the center of the reserve and moving west. So if you look at the left side of your map, location D, this is one of the most popular spots for birdwatching and is where several of our native duck and heron species can regularly be seen in the pond area. And finally, in the southern corner, bottom of the map, you'll find location E. It's a wonderful wooden structure with viewing slots. I strongly recommend visiting at dawn or dusk for the best sightings of bird hide. Right, that's everything from me on the layout. Any questions about volunteering, please do speak to me afterwards. Thank you very much.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Turn to Section 3. You will hear two postgraduate students, Lena and Tom, discussing their dissertation on offshore wind energy with their academic supervisor, Professor Hargreaves. You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Come in, Lena. Tom, thanks for being on time today. I've gone through your draft chapters, and there's some solid thinking there, especially in the methods section. But I do have a few concerns about your primary data source. First of all, when exactly was it collected?
It's from the North Sea Wind Energy Archive, Professor. We used the most recent full dataset they had available, which is about 4 years old.
Right. That's what I suspected. The offshore wind sector has moved very quickly in the last few years, so data that old may not fully reflect current developments. Did you look into more recent datasets at all, even if they were smaller or less detailed?
Yes, we did. We checked a couple of European energy agencies and some industry reports, but none of them had the same level of granularity as the North Sea Archive. Most of the newer data only provides high-level summaries, not turbine-level information.
I see. So you've chosen depth of detail over recency. That's understandable, but you'll need to justify that choice clearly in your methodology. I'll also try to connect you with a research center I know that works on offshore grid integration. They might have an updated dataset you can at least compare against.
That would be really helpful, actually. If we could even cross-check a small sample with newer figures, it would make our analysis more convincing.
Exactly. Now, Lena, in your literature review, what did you identify as the main challenges in offshore wind expansion?
From what I've read, the biggest challenge is the very high cost of underwater cabling and grid connection. Several studies point out that laying and maintaining subsea cables significantly increases the total project cost, especially for deeper water sites.
Yes, that's a key issue. Tom, how does your research differ from those existing studies?
Most of the studies we found focus on either economic factors or environmental impacts, but rarely both together. We've tried to combine them into a single integrated model so we can see how economic decisions influence environmental outcomes and vice versa. So for example, we look at how choosing deeper sites with stronger winds affects both power output and marine ecosystems.
Good. That integration is probably your strongest contribution, so make sure you highlight it clearly in your introduction and conclusion. Now, I have one suggestion. Consider adding a comparative case study, perhaps between the UK and Denmark.
A comparative case study, is that strictly necessary for the assessment, or is it more of an optional extra?
It's not required, no, but it would definitely strengthen your conclusions. The UK and Denmark have taken slightly different approaches to offshore wind policy and grid planning, so comparing them would give your analysis more depth and context.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can take the lead on that section. I'll look at capacity targets, subsidy schemes, and how each country manages grid integration, then update the references before our next meeting.
Good. Now let's talk about your main findings so far.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
What have you learned about turbine performance in deeper water?
Our preliminary results suggest that offshore turbines located in deeper water generate roughly 30% more power on average, mainly because they benefit from stronger and more consistent wind speeds.
However, we also found that maintenance costs are noticeably higher in those locations. The main issue is access. In bad weather, you simply can't send crews out as often, so minor problems can escalate if they're not addressed quickly.
Yes, access constraints are a major operational problem. What about your policy recommendations at this stage?
We suggest improving grid integration because current onshore grid systems aren't really designed to handle large volumes of offshore energy efficiently. We also think there should be clearer, long-term planning for transmission corridors.
And we argue that better coordination between neighbouring countries could reduce duplication of infrastructure, especially in the North Sea region.
Good points. Tom, what's your view on floating turbines, based on what you've read?
Personally, I support them. Floating turbines allow access to much deeper waters where the wind resource is stronger, and they can be relocated if necessary, but they're still relatively new, so there's some uncertainty around long-term reliability and cost.
Quite so. And what's your position on government subsidies for these technologies?
We think subsidies are important, but they need to be carefully designed. At the moment, the evidence on long-term cost-effectiveness is still developing, so we argue that more independent research is needed before committing to very large, long-term subsidy schemes.
That's a balanced view, and it will come across well in your discussion chapter. All right, I think that's enough for today. Let's meet again in 2 weeks to review your updated draft and any new data you manage to obtain.
Thank you, Professor. We'll revise the methodology, add the comparative case study, and see what we can do about newer data.
Yes, thanks a lot. We'll send you a revised version at least a few days before the next meeting.
Excellent. I'll look forward to reading it.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. You will hear an academic lecture delivered by Professor Diana Walsh on the neuroscience of human memory, specifically how the brain encodes, consolidates, and retrieves long-term memories, and what this means for learning strategies. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon. Today I want to take you through the neuroscience of human memory, and I mean that in a practical sense. I want you to leave this lecture understanding not just how memory works, but how to use that knowledge to study more effectively. Let's begin with brain structure. When we talk about forming new long-term memories, one region is central to that process, the hippocampus. It sits deep within the temporal lobe and acts as a kind of gateway. Without a functioning hippocampus, you cannot encode new long-term memories. Patients with damage to this area can still recall past events, but they struggle to form new lasting memories. Now, encoding a memory is only the first step. The memory then has to be consolidated, in other words, stabilized and stored. Interestingly, this process happens mainly during slow-wave sleep. During deep sleep, the brain replays experiences and strengthens neural connections. This is one reason why staying up all night to revise is often ineffective. Moving on to short-term memory. Research shows that we can hold around 7 items in short-term memory at one time, give or take a couple. This idea is often referred to as Miller's Law. If you try to remember too many unrelated items, your brain quickly becomes overloaded. So what happens to information we don't review? It begins to fade. This was first demonstrated by a psychologist called Ebbinghaus, who showed that forgetting can begin within hours of learning something new. Without reinforcement, a large portion of information is lost within the first day. So how can we improve memory? One of the most effective techniques is retrieval practice. This involves actively recalling information rather than simply rereading notes. Studies show that this method significantly improves long-term retention. Another important factor is emotion. Emotional experiences are remembered more clearly than neutral ones. This is because a part of the brain called the amygdala strengthens memory formation by releasing certain hormones. Now let's look at review strategies. Research suggests that the best approach is spaced repetition. For example, reviewing material after 24 hours, then after 1 week, and then again after 1 month. Each review strengthens the memory and slows down forgetting. At the biological level, memory is linked to something called long-term potentiation. This refers to the strengthening of connections between neurons. The more frequently these connections are used, the stronger they become. However, memory can also be negatively affected. Chronic stress increases levels of cortisol in the brain. Over time, high levels of this hormone can damage brain cells and impair memory function. Finally, let's consider study techniques. One highly effective method is interleaving, that is, mixing different topics within a single study session. Although this feels more difficult, it actually improves what we call discriminative thinking and leads to better long-term retention. So, to summarize, get enough sleep, test yourself regularly, review information over time, manage stress, and vary your study topics. The neuroscience strongly supports all of these strategies. Thank you.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
That is the end of the listening test. Check your answers. Comment your score. All the best, my dear fellow student. Your hard work will pay off one day.